Welcome to Less Clutter More You, a podcast that travels with you through the journey of letting go and creating order so you can start making more room for what matters most. Together, we'll go beyond the basket to start unlocking your next level of embracing your physical and mental space through mindset shifts and action steps. I'm your host, Maggie Britton, professional organizer, clutter coach, wife, and mom of four, and I am so glad you are here. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode. I wanted to talk about something that I see show up in every single space that I work in, that people ask me about, and that is the concept of clutter boundaries. Because when we do not set boundaries, when we do not respect the boundaries, that is the perfect opportunity for clutter to take advantage of our lack of boundaries, seep in, spill over, and take over. So let's talk about boundaries today in a few different ways. Obviously, we have our physical boundaries, but we're also going to get into the time boundaries, the commitment boundaries, the mental boundaries that you are setting that all play a huge role into your ability to live with less clutter and more you. And boundaries is something that we talk about in the COCO organized framework to clearing the clutter, getting organized, and staying organized. And it's that staying organized that the boundaries really are the front runner. So let's start with what is a boundary, because we can't actually set something that we don't fully understand, right? So a boundary is a border, and it can be physical, or it can be abstract, more like a moral boundary, but is basically a line that marks the limit of an area, a dividing line. That's, if you Google, that's what's coming up. A line that marks the limit of an area. And again, that can be a physical line, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that line might look like depending on what space you're working on, depending on what stories you're telling yourself, and it might look like something that's much more abstract, not visible to the naked eye, but something that still needs to be put into place in order to prevent that clutter from coming in and sending it out when it is taking over. So let's start with the physical boundary, because that is the easiest. You can see it, you can touch it in many ways. And what has happened, I've had two clients for the past couple of months, and they have two very different homes. One is a large home with open space, plenty of closet space. And then there is the other client who had a smaller home. Minimal closet space, almost non-existent. It was one of these 1950 Cape Cod, and they thought everybody could fit all of the food for a family of four in one tiny little pantry, or that everybody's coats could fit in one tiny little closet. But regardless, despite the difference in space, their boundaries are what was gonna make or break the success of the systems that they put in place. Because whether you have the space doesn't mean you have to fill it. And if you don't have the quote unquote space that you wish you had, doesn't mean you can't stay clutter-free and organized. So despite whatever space that you might be thinking of that you are working in, maybe it's your home, maybe it's your workspace, it doesn't matter the size. What matters is your commitment to respecting the boundaries that the space is spelling out for you clearly. So in those two situations where one day of the week I was working in this larger home and then later that same week I was working in this smaller home, we were still able to make the spaces work because we respected the boundaries. So when you have the physical boundary, you need to designate what is that limit. What's the limit? And the boundary in your space, it could be a room. It could be a closet. It could be a desk drawer. It could be a kitchen drawer. It could be a coat closet. It could be a front porch area. What is that space that we want to define? Where is the line? What is it representing? Because no matter what that physical space is, there still has to be a limit, because when there is no limit, that is when the clutter, as we know, comes right through the front door and never heads back out. And sometimes with that physical space, those physical boundaries, it might be just a clutter-free zone altogether. Maybe there's not even a physical item. Maybe it's a kitchen counter that you know there are only certain things that belong on there and nothing else. And that's the boundary. The number of items on there, that's your boundary. For example, on my kitchen counter, I have 3 containers that hold tea bags and iced tea bags, and then I have a toaster, and then I have my mail hub. Beyond that, anything else is considered clutter in that space because it is passing my boundary limit. I've already set those limits. Maybe it's a container or a basket. So maybe in your front coat closet, there is a basket on the top shelf for winter hats. Well, when that basket becomes full and spilling out, that is your boundary saying, hello, remember me? And the minute that you get soft with that boundary, it is going to run with it. Because maybe all of a sudden you say, well, it doesn't fit into that basket, but I can certainly make it fit into this basket. We can extend that boundary. Let's loosen that boundary up a little bit. That's where the trouble comes in. Or maybe you say, instead of extending that boundary, I'm just going to push and really make that boundary limit, make that line work for all it's worth. And I am going to shove things in there. And then if I close the door, that boundary is still working for me. But that is still not respecting your boundary. Because how you place things into that space and boundary matters. Just because you have a basket, it doesn't mean shove as much as you can in it. I mean, put the things in a way that you can reach in, making it easier for you to find what you need when you need it, and then put it away when you are done using it. So that is part of that physical boundary and respecting it. It might mean when you buy a new shirt, instead of buying more hangers, you let something go. In my closet, I will not buy new hangers. That is my boundary. The number of hangers shows my limit. And if I try to tweak that limit, I can really get smart and I can really talk myself down a rabbit hole of how I can make it work. But when you start trying to tweak the limits, stop right there. Pay attention to your thought process. Because if you're trying to outsmart the limit, then the clutter is going to outsmart you. So that might look like that 1 in, 1 out rule. Maybe you've even gained the confidence to do 1 in, 2 out, 1 in, 3 out, 2 in, 5 out. Whatever it is, how you can make sure that you're sticking to that boundary and play a little game, right? Maybe that's I'm in the competition against myself, right? It's that PR, it's that personal record for myself to be able to say, oh, all right, I stuck to my boundaries. Where my shoes belong, I literally cannot extend beyond that shoe boundary because other places in my closet are not made for that. End of story. Full stop. If the shoes don't fit on that shelf, I need to let something go. Or I need to not allow it past my front door in the first place. So physical boundaries, really setting those space limits and dedicating specific spaces for items so that they're not spilling into other spaces. So beyond the physical boundary, what do we have? We have time boundaries. We have that commitment boundaries that is preventing us from even following through on either setting the initial boundary or respecting the boundaries on our day to day. So if you are not allowing enough space in your calendar, it is going to be very hard for you to respect the boundaries. If your day is booked out from morning to night and you're not working in a 15-minute reset at the end of the day, or maybe an hour in a certain space that needs a little bit more throughout the year, then that is only going to hurt your physical boundaries. So you might have to say no. You might have to say, I am sorry. This Sunday evening, I am setting my boundaries. I am adding in that time for me to respect the boundaries, for me to check, go around, go through your house, take 15 minutes, do a different space each day, and just stand there and look and see, what am I missing? Where have I let those boundaries get a little loosey-goosey? Because when you're in a busy season of life or the year, then there's a good chance that some of those boundaries get a little messy and get a little undone and they need to be reset. But if you set them in the first place, it's easier to follow through going forward. And if you haven't set the time in your calendar and set that boundary to create those lines, those limits, then that might be something you have to start with. You might have to set the boundary and say, no, I am not going to be able to join you on a shopping trip today because I'm actually setting boundaries in my physical space. So regardless of if it's the time boundary or the physical boundary, you have to set them and then you have to give yourself time to follow through. Maybe it's the decision deadline boundary. I'm going to donate this, okay? What is that limit on getting it to where you want it to donate? Because I see a lot of times people want to donate specific things to specific places, but then they are stuck because they haven't followed through that time boundary, and now that item is sitting in their dining room for months or years at a time. Maybe you are posting to Facebook Marketplace or your local Buy Nothing group, and you have put something out for free or for sale. And that deadline of pickup has come and gone because no one's respecting your boundaries because you haven't clearly set them. This item is available for pickup by Friday afternoon. And then if that doesn't happen, that item will be donated. End of story. Follow that time boundary of deadlines. I am going to clear up my basement by this time next year. But then something comes up. And that time boundary gets a little soft. And before you know it, a month has gone by, a season has gone by, a year has gone by because the time boundaries were not respected. Let's talk about digital boundaries. Probably the one that nobody really wants to say out loud or put into place. This can sometimes be harder than creating those physical boundaries. So where digital clutter is showing up is exactly where you need to set the boundary. Do you need to set time limit boundaries around your digital consumption, whether that is the news, work, social media? Do you need to set boundaries of where those devices are not entering? Maybe it's not coming to the dining room table. Maybe it's not staying next to your bed at night. Setting physical end time boundaries around the digital spaces can have a huge effect, and there are ways that you can help put these into place. Apps that turn certain things off. Maybe there's someone else in your house that can hold you accountable for those things. But decluttering your digital life is about setting those boundaries and taking those necessary steps and breaks and turning off notifications or shutting down your computer at the hour that you had intended when it is possible. And there are small steps that you can also take beyond those apps, even just your inbox. You can unsubscribe so that you are not getting all of the notifications that there is a sale. Maybe there is a folder that you are holding the digital receipts in, but then what's your max? What's the time limit on that? How far out are you holding those receipts? You need to determine what makes sense for you and what's your capacity. Because even though it just might be digital space, that digital space builds up, even if we can't see those definitive lines. So you're going to have to create those lines for yourself. And that is also that social boundary of creating those invisible lines. Is someone asking you to do something when you need to be using that time elsewhere? Can you say no to extra commitments for mental space? Can you say no, thank you to hand-me-downs or to the free swag at a conference? If you follow me on Instagram, you saw that I was recently at a conference, and my boundary going into that conference was no swag. There was nothing there that I needed except for making connection and conversation. Not the free stuff. Are you able to say no thank you when you're walking through the makeup section of the mall and they want to give you a freebie? How can you say no throughout your day to prevent the clutter from coming in? No thank you. I don't need that. No thank you. I am at capacity. And if you haven't listened to our capacity episode, you need to go back. I will drop that into the show notes, but take a listen to that, because that reminds you that you do get to set that boundary. Your capacity is based on your needs, not the physical size of your house. Someone else doesn't get to determine that they are bringing gifts into your home because you have the space. Your kids could use this. I thought you might like this. I'm going to just swing by and drop off something that I can't use without asking you. That is a boundary I have set in place. There are no just swing by and drop offs. Send me a picture. I will let you know if it's something that I want or that I can use. And if not, then that item gets donated. That is a very strict boundary that I had to put in place with my extended family, with my mother. And I had to have that conversation. Sometimes creating those boundaries requires hard conversations or just uncomfortable conversations. But once you open that up and express and communicate that you are setting your own boundaries, that you have your own decluttering goals, that you have your own vision for your space, then it is a lot easier to remind people of those boundaries when they try to cross the boundaries. Maybe somebody's buying gifts constantly. That's their love language because they just don't know that you have these boundaries. You have to communicate them. And then what are the mental boundaries that you have set for yourself? Are you allowing yourself to spiral when you're trying to let go of something because you have been given a story as to why it should be important to you, or that something holds value because you have spent so much money on it, pay attention to those boundaries, because that is where the magic happens. When you start to not allow those unhelpful, untrue stories to come into your mental space about your physical items in your physical space, it's going to be so much easier to stick to your physical boundaries. And choosing only what aligns with your decluttering goals, not somebody else's. Does something actually add value to you, or is it going to become clutter? Determine that. Make those decisions prior to shopping. Make those decisions as you are touching things that you currently own that you are trying to let go of. Write it down. As soon as you start to listen to your thoughts and you are hearing something that does not belong in your mental space and is trying to creep in over those limit lines, write it down and start learning about what your brain is trying to tell you. It may even be worth asking yourself why. Why am I unable to stay within the boundaries that I have set? Why is it so important to me to go beyond the space that is right in front of me? Am I so concerned about the quantity of things that I am unable to stick to the boundaries in my home, in my workspace, and in my mental space? And then you come back with the power to set the boundaries of those mental thoughts so that you can protect your mental space. So go through your home, go through your thoughts, go through your inbox, go through your calendar and see where are your boundaries either not set at all, and how can you set them? And then look and see at the ones that maybe have been set. Maybe you did recently do your pantry, but those boundaries in those bins are creeping out. Maybe you did start to pull back and create more space in your calendar, but you've noticed that lately you've been saying yes to everything, and so your physical space has been taking a hit. But whatever you do, pay attention to those boundaries, because that drawer cannot hold another single shirt, even though it might be able to be shoved in there, because when you're shoving, you're disrespecting yourself. You're disrespecting those boundaries when you're trying to get things to fit in a space that they don't belong. And if you need help with this, reach out to me. Reach out if you need support in creating the boundaries, in maintaining the boundaries. I can help you with that. And in person, my team can help you create this. This is one of the best things that we offer, is creating those boundaries and working with you to understand your limits so that we can create and set up the systems so that it's easier to maintain. So take the action, go out on a boundary hunt, whether it's on your own, with my team in person, or you and I working together virtually to set the boundaries, maintain the boundaries, and give yourself the gift of boundaries so you can live with less clutter and more you. Thank you for tuning in. If after listening you have gained just a boost of motivation to start thinking about your clutter and taking action to clear it, then I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and leave a rating and review so we can continue to grow and inspire others just like you. In the meantime, I'll be here cheering you on your next step forward with living with less clutter and more you.